Good afternoon, good afternoon. It's me, Victorious One, coming to you again, but this time I'm coming from my mother's house. And the reason why I'm here is because I wanted to interview her. But of course, I know we're going off a little bit from my other two videos talking about my journey through sarcoid. But I wanted to do something a little different because I know me and my son have done a live video on Facebook talking about my father and his inheritance and his legacy and his involvement with the group, The Last Poets. So I was a young child when he was in this group. So I thought I would interview my mom, who was there from day one, so that she could give you a little bit of the background, let you know when he started, his involvement, what they did, what The Last Poets was about, and a little bit of their history. So, again, this is my mom, Ann Hurry, and she's going to give you a little bit of the background and what they did. So, Mom, go ahead and tell our audience what was going on at the time.
Thank you, Colette, for inviting me to be on your new channel.
You're welcome.
And I hope that I can give you some insight as to where we came from as far as this is concerned. This was The Last Poets really began up in Harlem in May 1968.
Okay.
And they had a loft up in Harlem called the East Wind. And that's where they used to go and practice and have their, they would even do some of their performances there and have people come in. But they also, the main thing that they wanted to do was to make more African Americans aware of what we were, what kinds of things we had to put up with, what kinds of things we needed to think more about, and try to make some determination about doing more things to make things better for us. This was also during the time the first spoken word poet during that time was Gil Scott Heron. And the only difference is Gil Scott did his on stage without any kind of accompaniment, wherein the Last Poets had a conga percussionist who was my husband, your father, and they would do their performances. During that time, there were a lot of festivals in the park up in Harlem, and the poets were often performers for those events. They also did performances in at colleges and universities. And what they were trying to do was make people aware of where we had come from and why we needed to make some changes about where we were going.
Oh, okay.
The first album was called The Last Poets, and a lot of people have probably seen that album. The poets are standing out in front of this tenement up in Harlem with your dad with his drum and Alafia, and I think during that time it was Alafia Pudin and Abiodun.
Okay.
They and then they did a second album, and it was called The Fire Next Time. And that album cover had it was an oil painting with the background was like as if they were in a ring of fire. And those were the only two albums that they did. They did one more called Chastisement. And that one, I haven't even been able to find a copy of that album myself. But the other two, I do have copies of. But that was during the time when Martin Luther King was going around trying to make people aware of what African Americans were going through, to try to get them to get on board and try to make some differences through peaceful demonstrations. So,
Well, I'm not sure if you said, maybe I didn't hear. Who were the members of the Last Poets during that time?
Okay, it started out with Alafia Pudin, Gylan Kane, Abi O'Doon, and Felipe Luciano. And believe it or not, Felipe is still a broadcaster at one of the stations up in New York, still. And Abi O'Doon is a adjunct professor, I think, at Columbia University. Uma, who came in after Felipe left, lives in Ohio, and he still performs with Abi O'Doon. So they're still together now. Occasionally, they'll do performances. So they're still around. And your dad, in 1981, he passed away from a malignant brain tumor. So that's when they did get another young man that became the percussionist. But everybody knows Brother Elijah. That was your dad, and knows of his being a part of the company.
Right. Now, when did he leave the Last Poets?
He left the Poets. Let me see. They started in '68. I guess it was like around 70,
Okay.
70, 71.
So he performed with them for 2 years.
Yes, at
Okay.
least 2 years.
Okay. Well, I remember as a little girl going, you all allowed me to go to the Apollo when the Last Poets performed there, and they were on the ticket with the OJs, and I can't remember the woman singer. She sang the Cleanup Woman. I don't know if you remember her.
Frida Payne.
Frida Payne was on the ticket that night. So it was a school night, but I remember being able to go see them perform, and I remember my dad getting autograph from the OJs for me, because back then, yes, I liked the OJs. But anyway, so we just wanted to come on. I wanted to interview my mom, like I said, so she could give you a background, or rather the history of the Last Poets, who are a part of Black history. If you go to Washington, D.C. and visit the African American Museum, they have a display for the Last Poets. Were we at the opening? No, because the Last Poets were invited, but for some reason, our family was not invited, even though my father is on the album and the 8-track that is displayed there. There's a display also in the Martin Luther King Museum, and some other things that are being put out, some paraphernalia like shirts, cell phone covers, sweatshirts, other things that are being sold, also with my father's face on them. And also the albums are being sold as well. They are still being sold to this day. The albums, not the ones for the new Last Poets, but the albums from when my father, the original ones when my father was the percussionist. So just wanting to put this out here. There will be other interviews. I'll probably somehow, even though my brother is not in the same area I'm in, figure out a way to interview him as well. He was young. In fact, my brother wasn't even born when my father was in the Last Poets. So, but he has some people he's talked to, he's done some research, so I'll get his feelings on what he thinks about what is going on now with the Last Poets. So again, I thank you all for listening. Please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to this video. If you have any thoughts, just put your thoughts in the comment section. And again, we thank you for listening. Thank you, Mom, for being a part of this interview. And again, like, share, comment, and subscribe.